The day Marissa left, I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just sat on the edge of our unmade bed and wrote her a letter she would never read, or so I thought. It was supposed to be closed, not for her, she had already moved on, but for me. I folded the letter, slid it into the drawer of the old pine desk we built together one summer, and locked it away with everything else I never said out loud. I didn't know that 6 months later, that same letter would go viral. It started with a stranger's post titled, "The Saddest Goodbye I've Ever Read." No name, no context. But every line was mine. Every sentence I had bled onto that page now echoed in the comments section of a blog I'd never visited. Thousands of strangers were dissecting my heartbreak, calling it poetic, tragic, beautiful. Some thought it was fiction. Some tried to guess who the letter was about. But none of them knew the woman behind it all, Marissa. And Marissa had no idea the letter was about her. At least, not yet. Back when I wrote it, she had packed her bags while I was at work. No goodbye, no note, just a hollow apartment that still smelled like her favorite vanilla candles. Harry, my oldest friend, told me not to chase after her, said if someone can leave that quietly, they were planning it all along. But I knew Marissa, or at least, I thought I did. We weren't a storybook couple. We argued, we drifted, we broke things and tried to tape them back together, and then one day, she was just gone. The letter was never meant to beg, it wasn't an "I miss you," it wasn't even an apology, it was just the truth, written raw, how I loved her even when I hated her, how silence built taller walls than anger ever could, how watching her fall out of love in slow motion felt like being erased. Margaret, my co-worker, found the letter when I asked her to help me clean out the apartment before the lease expired. She read it without asking, and then cried. "You should publish this," she whispered. "I'm not a writer," I said. "No, but you're a man in pain, and sometimes, that's enough." I didn't publish it, but apparently she did. Without my name, without Marissa's, just words, floating free. And now, those words weren't mine anymore. It would have ended there, except Marissa stumbled across the post, not because she searched for it, but because her friend sent it to her. Doesn't this sound like something John would write? She read it twice, 3 times, and by the 4th, her hands were shaking. She called me for the first time in months, no greeting. Just one quiet question. "Did you write this?" I didn't lie. And that's when the real story began. Because what do you say to the woman who walked out of your life without goodbye, when she's finally reading the words you wrote after she left? What do you say when the letter that bared your soul to the void is suddenly the thing that brings her back to your doorstep? I didn't plan to answer that call, I just listened. Her breath was shaky, her silence louder than any apology. Then came her voice again, more fragile this time. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." I leaned back against the wall, heart thudding like I was 20 again. "Then why did you go?" "Because I thought you already had." I closed my eyes. Somewhere in another tab, the letter was still open, still being shared, still misunderstood. But Marissa knew now, and maybe, that was all that mattered. My name is John. I work in post-production for a mid-sized documentary house in the city. Most people think that means I edit film. In truth, I edit silence. Awkward pauses between words. 2 long shots of blinking eyes, uneven breaths in voiceovers. I cut out the pieces no one else wants to hear. The irony isn't lost on me. I met Marissa during one of those long-forgotten years that sits between ambition and burnout. I was 25, still recovering from a breakup that had stripped me of optimism and half my kitchenware. She was 23, doing marketing for a fashion startup with a name that changed every quarter. I was the guy who used noise-canceling headphones at parties. She was the girl who danced barefoot in someone else's living room without spilling her wine. We were mismatched from the start. Margaret used to say, that's what made it interesting. Margaret was my senior editor, but she'd been a mentor long before that. She saw the way I looked at Marissa the first time she visited our office to pitch an influencer collaboration. She leaned over my desk and said, "You're not her type, you know." "I don't have a type," I replied. "Everyone has a type. You're quiet grief, she's a loud ambition." But Margaret was wrong. Marissa noticed me, or maybe she was just bored that day and liked the way I brewed coffee. She asked if I liked films. I said I liked silence. She thought I was joking. I wasn't. Our first date was at a tiny independent theater that only played black and white European films from the 1950s. I watched her more than I watched the screen. She leaned forward when the characters whispered, curled her legs under her when they cried, and laughed like she didn't care who was listening. On the way home, I told her I didn't really understand the movie. She said, "It's okay, understanding is overrated." I think I fell for her at that moment, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she didn't try to explain away the parts of life that didn't make sense. She just lived in them. We moved in together 8 months later. It wasn't some grand decision. Her lease ended, mine was flexible, and suddenly she was bringing her coffee mugs and throw pillows into my carefully muted world. The apartment changed with her. My grays turned into rust tones, my silence turned into Spotify playlists I didn't create. My fridge started holding oat milk and leftover pad thai. Harry hated it. He called Marissa a walking contradiction. She doesn't listen, John. She performs. You can't be in a real relationship with someone who's always on stage. But I wasn't looking for quiet anymore. I was looking for momentum, and Marissa had it in abundance. We lasted 3 years, maybe a little more, if you count the drift, that slow, invisible undoing where you still wake up beside each other but stop saying goodnight, where text messages turn into calendars, where love becomes logistics. We had a fight about a shelf once. She wanted it up in the hallway. I said I'd do it next weekend. She stared at me and said, "You don't want to make this a home, do you?" That wasn't true. I just didn't want to drill into plaster at 11 p.m., but she took it as a sign that I wasn't committed, that I didn't want forever. And maybe she was right. Not because I didn't love her, but because I never really learned how to show it in a language she understood. She left without a scene. No shouting, no accusations, just absence, like someone slowly erasing themselves from the edge of a photograph. It took me 3 days to realize she wasn't coming back. The apartment echoed, not with sound, but with memory. Her perfume still clung to the hallway. Her toothbrush sat untouched in the bathroom. I stared at it longer than I'd like to admit. I didn't tell Harry. I didn't tell Margaret. I just kept going to work. Sat in my editing booth. Cut silence out of strangers' voices while mine screamed in every quiet space. Then one day, Margaret noticed. "You look like someone cracked your ribs and forgot to sew you back up," she said, tossing a granola bar onto my desk. "She's gone," I replied. Margaret didn't ask who. She already knew. She just sat down next to me, unwrapped her bar, and said, "Then write it down, before you forget what it felt like." I didn't plan to write a letter. I just opened a Word doc and started typing. It wasn't formatted. No, dear Marissa. No, sincerely, John. Just a stream of sentences that poured out faster than I could catch them. I wrote about the morning she sang to the plants, about the time we built IKEA furniture without fighting, about how she cried during a shampoo commercial and refused to admit it. I wrote about the time I caught her staring at me like I was the only person in the room, and how I never told her that I saw. I wrote everything I couldn't say when she was here. When I was done, I saved it to a folder named Unsent. I printed a copy and stuck it in the drawer of the desk we stained with spilled coffee and forgotten to-do lists. It felt symbolic, like placing a piece of myself inside something we built together. I never meant for anyone to read it. But Margaret found it. She was helping me pack, folding Marissa's old scarves, dusting off books we never finished. She saw the paper, read it without asking, and cried. "This isn't just a letter," she said. "It's a eulogy for a living person." I didn't mean for it to be anything. But it is. I didn't think about it again until 6 months later. When Marissa called me, voice shaking, asking if I had written the viral goodbye letter tearing across the internet. "I didn't mean for you to see it," I said. But I did. And just like that, the door I thought was bolted shut swung open again. Not because I wanted it, but because she did. I'd spent a year trying to forget her. She'd spent it trying to figure out if I ever mean to it at all. Now the letter that was never meant to be read had become the bridge we never built when we had the chance. 2 weeks passed after Marissa's call, and I heard nothing. I thought maybe it had been a moment of weakness, a flare of nostalgia that cooled down before it burned through her walls. I didn't expect anything from her. I'd said everything in the letter, anything beyond that was up to her. But the silence lingered. Then, one afternoon, Margaret knocked on the edge of my editing booth with her phone in her hand, eyes narrowed. "You're trending again," she said. I pulled off my headphones. "What?" She turned her screen to me. A screenshot of a tweet. The caption read, "The viral breakup letter that broke me." Underneath was a selfie of Marissa, her signature tousled hair and curated natural look, staring into the camera with damp eyes, and the caption, "For those wondering, yes, I was her. Her, not me, not John, not he, not we." She didn't say who wrote it, she didn't tag me, but she took the spotlight, the sympathy, the sudden wave of followers who flooded her comments with hearts and hugs and hashtags. Margaret looked at me carefully. "You okay?" I stared at the screen and felt something I hadn't expected, not heartbreak, humiliation. She didn't even ask. Marissa had never been big on credit. She posted the letter like it was a painting she once posed for, not something I'd poured my lungs into, not something I had buried like a grave. And now, the internet was calling her brave, a survivor, a goddess of grief. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was hollow. Harry was less diplomatic. "You realize she's using it, right?" he said later that night as we shared a beer on his rooftop. "She ghosted you, ignored the letter, then posted it the second she realized it made people cry. She didn't say it was hers. She didn't have to, that's the game, you leave just enough out so people make assumptions that favor you." I wanted to defend her, but the words didn't come. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if he was wrong. Marissa had always been skilled at controlling a room, not by force, but by atmosphere. She'd enter, say little, smile just right, and suddenly the attention shifted. Everyone noticed her, everyone liked her, and she never asked for it, so no one ever accused her of taking it. The next morning, I got a DM. It was from her. Just one sentence. I didn't think it would get this big. No apology, no explanation. Just a message that made it clear. She knew what she did, and she didn't regret it. I didn't reply. But I started writing again. Not letters, not essays, scripts. I stayed up nights, carving out dialogue between fictional versions of us. Characters who loved, who broke, who said the things we never could without flinching. I gave them all our traits, her laugh, my reluctance, her pride, my silence, and then I twisted the ending. In one version, she comes back too late. In another, she never leaves. And in the most painful one, he's the one who walks away first. It became addictive. Margaret noticed. "Are you writing revenge fiction?" she asked me with a raised brow, seeing the files titled things like Exit Strategy, One-Way Street, Unsent Drafts. "It's just processing." She nodded, but her eyes said more. Then came the podcast. A relationship influencer, Marissa, followed and read the letter aloud on air. Dramatic music, soft-spoken narration. An anonymous writer shared this deeply emotional piece about heartbreak. We don't know the author. Boo, at the subject. She's come forward, and she's healing. I stared at the speaker like it had insulted my mother. Healing? She was doing brand deals, posting curated pictures of herself sipping tea with captions like, "Learning to let go." Meanwhile, I was trying to figure out if I was the villain in a story I wrote. Harry sent me screenshots. "She's selling merch now, tote bags with quotes from the letter. No attribution, of course." I laughed, not because it was funny, because I was angry. I was entering the absurd. Then Margaret said the one thing that knocked the air out of me. "She knows exactly what she's doing, John." It wasn't cruel, it was honest. Because the truth wasn't that Marissa posted the letter by accident. The truth was, she recognized the power in it, she recognized me in it, and she decided not to say my name, because that would make it real. The irony? I wasn't even trying to stay anonymous, I just didn't think the world would ever read it. 1 week later, I got an email from a small indie publisher. They found the letter, they loved the rawness, they asked if I had more. I said yes. They wanted to publish a collection, not under a pen name, under mine. I said yes again. It wasn't revenge, it was a reclamation. If she was going to rewrite the story, I had to publish the original. I told Harry first. He grinned. Finally, she hijacked the narrative, "You're just taking the wheel back." Margaret was more careful. Are you ready for what happens next? I didn't know. But I was done watching from the sidelines. Then Marissa called again. This time, I answered. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I heard, she said. About the book? Yes. Are you going to post about it? A pause. I might. Before or after you explain why you turned my grief into your spotlight. She exhaled. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Another silence. I missed you, she said finally. You could have said that. Instead, you said nothing. Then used the loudest platform you could to talk about something you never responded to. I didn't know how to respond. You knew how to monetize it. That stung. I heard it land, but I didn't take it back. You wrote the letter like I was already gone, she whispered. You were. I read it, and it broke me. But it didn't bring you back. I didn't think I had the right. Now it was my turn to be quiet. Because I didn't know either. We weren't together, we weren't enemies, but we weren't innocent anymore either. I want to see you, she said. To say what? To start over. That was the line that tore it open. Start over? You don't start over after betrayal, you build from the ruins or walk away, but you don't rewind time just because you miss the warmth. I don't think I can do that, I said. Her breath caught. I'll send you a copy of the book, I added. Not out of spite, out of truth. I already know the words, she whispered. You never really did. I hung up. And this time, I was the one who left without goodbye. Some nights I couldn't tell if I was mourning Marissa or the version of me that once believed she'd never leave. Even after everything, after the silence, after the stolen letter, after the applause she caught from a wound she didn't acknowledge, I still dreamed of her. Not the curated version, not the one posting healing quotes or lighting candles for engagement, just her, barefaced at 3 a.m., eating cereal out of a mug, laughing at my serious voice when I read movie credits aloud. In the dreams, she came back different, honest, soft, sorry. But in the mornings, the inboxes reminded me what she really came back as. A spotlight. A brand. A caption. And me? I was a footnote in my own heartbreak. I didn't tell anyone about the second letter. Not Harry. Not Margaret. Not the publisher. It wasn't a follow-up. It was a confession. I wrote it because I needed to say something without the noise, without hashtags or sympathy, or guesses about what happened behind closed doors. I wrote it because I wanted to admit something I never had the courage to before. That part of me still loved her. Not because she deserved it, but because love doesn't switch off just because someone used it as a platform. It lingers. Like music after the record stops spinning. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and expect her to be there, even though I knew she wasn't. I'd make too much pasta, pour 2 glasses of wine, fold the laundry with her side of the bed still untouched. I couldn't decide if that was a habit or hope of refusing to die. Harry saw through it. You keep building rooms for someone who moved out a long time ago, he said one night. I just like my space clean. No, John, you like it waiting. I laughed it off, but I felt it in my throat like something stuck. Margaret was quieter about it. She came to one of the publisher meetings with me, listened while they talked about numbers and campaigns and promotional angles. Then in the elevator, she asked softly, "What are you most afraid of?" I didn't answer right away, because the answer wasn't losing Marissa, it was being right about her. Because if everything Harry said was true, if everything Margaret implied was real, then I wasn't just someone who got left. I was someone who loved someone incapable of loving back the same way. And what did that make me? Blind, naive, a fool? The worst part was, I missed her anyway. Not every day, just on the quiet ones. When the world moved slow enough for memory to catch up. When someone used her shampoo scent, when a laugh on the subway sounded like hers, when a girl with the same shade of nail polish brushed past me in the bookstore. It wasn't constant, but it was precise, and it made me question everything. I started avoiding social media. Every time I logged on, there she was again, on someone's story, in someone's quote box, her words paired with my pain. Sometimes, she posted clips from old voice notes, just snippets, her laughing, her singing in the kitchen. But none of them included me. She was building an audience off a ghost. And I was the ghost. I told myself it didn't matter. That the book would fix the record. That putting the truth into the world would somehow bring me peace. But the truth was messier than that. Because some nights, I still wondered what would have happened if I had drilled that shelf. If I had noticed her pulling away sooner. If I had written that letter when she was still here, not 6 months too late. Maybe she wouldn't have left. Maybe I wouldn't have had to write at all. One night, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, a real envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo of us. The one I'd forgotten even existed. We were at the beach. She had just thrown a piece of bread at a seagull and was laughing like a kid. I was behind her, watching her like she was the only thing in focus. On the back, in her handwriting, I should have fought harder. That night, I couldn't sleep. Because I didn't know what it meant. Was it regret? Was it an apology? Was it bait? I showed it to Margaret the next day. She studied it for a long time before asking, "Does it change anything?" I stared at the photo. "I don't know. Do you want it to?" I didn't answer. Because part of me did. And part of me didn't trust that part anymore. I kept working on the book, kept polishing sentences, kept checking drafts. But the excitement had worn off. It wasn't about revenge anymore, or justice, it was survival. Every paragraph I edited was a piece of me I had to make peace with. Every chapter title felt like reopening a scar. One day, the publisher called. "The manuscript is done," they said. "We're ready to go live." I stared at the screen, then whispered, "Okay." I signed off. And when the book came out, I didn't post a thing. No announcement, no link, no celebratory photo with a coffee mug and a soft smile. I just watched it exist, quietly, like I had. The reviews came in, raw, honest, brutal, beautiful. People saw themselves in the pain, they underlined the parts that hurt, they quoted the parts that healed. And finally, no one was asking who she was. They were talking about me. The voice, the heart, the grief that wasn't performative. It was the first time I didn't feel like a side character in my own story. Harry took me out for drinks. Margaret made me sign her copy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to text Marissa, not to gloat, not to reconnect. Just nothing. That, I think, was freedom. Because healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just waking up one morning and realizing the silence doesn't ache anymore. Sometimes it's walking into the kitchen, seeing one glass, one plate, one chair, and feeling like it's enough. I still keep the photo, but not on the wall, it's in a drawer, under the original letter, the one she never read, and maybe never will, but that's okay. Some things aren't meant to be shared, some things are just meant to be survived. 3 months passed after the book was released. By then, the storm had quieted, the comments had slowed, Marissa had stopped posting about the letter, the internet had moved on to someone else's tragedy. I was back to my workbench, splicing interview reels and cleaning audio files. The world felt muted in a way I could finally live with. Then I got the email. It came from a production company I didn't recognize. Subject line, "Book adaptation inquiry, urgent." I nearly deleted it, thought it was another spammy pitch or low-budget podcast request, but something made me open it. Inside was a simple, formal message. They had read the book. They were interested in acquiring adaptation rights. Film, potentially a limited series. They believed the story had raw cinematic potential. They offered a number. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just generous, it was transformative, enough to leave my job, enough to start something new, enough to finally put the past in a closed folder. I forwarded it to Margaret. Her reply came instantly. "Are you going to say yes?" I hadn't decided. Something didn't feel settled, but I couldn't explain what. Later that week, the company arranged a video call. They introduced the team. Creative leads, script consultants. Then they dropped the surprise. They already had a screenwriter in mind. Marissa. I blinked at the screen, unsure if I excuse me? One of the producers smiled like it was good news. Marissa's been in development with us on a separate project. She actually mentioned this manuscript before it was even published. She's got deep emotional insight into the material. I stared at them in disbelief. She didn't write the book, I said flatly. The smile froze. Of course, but she's familiar with history, right? There's an emotional connection that we think could bring depth. Margaret was on the call too. Her face had gone still. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. Do you want the woman I wrote about, the one who walked out of my life, ignored my letter, and posted about it without permission, to adapt my story for the screen? The silence was thick. Finally, one producer said, John, we just think her voice could add perspective. She's been part of the public conversation around the story. She wasn't supposed to be. Exactly, he said, but that's what made it go viral. Two people, two sides, unresolved tension. It's compelling. I closed my eyes. It wasn't about story, it was about drama, about headlines. Thank you for your time, I said, and ended the call. Margaret texted me immediately after. You okay? I didn't answer. I just sat there in my apartment, heart pounding, not with grief, but something colder, something sharper. I didn't feel sad, I felt erased. They didn't want my story. They wanted hers. My heartbreak was just a vehicle, my words, just scaffolding. And once again, Marissa was walking in through a door I built, wearing a version of me like a borrowed coat. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to her page, and there it was, pinned to the top. A new post. Her sitting at a desk. Manuscript pages spread in front of her. Caption. Full circle. Life is strange. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I just stared. She wasn't lying. It was full circle, but not in the way she meant. She had once refused to read a letter I left for her. Now she was profiting off a version of it that she didn't write, never replied to, and never gave back. And people were cheering her on, calling her powerful, calling her resilient. She wasn't the villain, she wasn't the victim. She was the brand, and I was the origin that never made it to the headline. Harry called me the next morning, I heard. How? The agency leaked it, they thought it would build buzz. I didn't ask how he knew, Harry always knew. She's telling people she co-wrote it, he added after a pause. My grip tightened on the phone. She didn't write a word. I know, but this is how it starts. One platform turns into a panel turns into a contract. Suddenly, the truth is just a footnote. I stared at the manuscript on my desk. I had signed away the rights already. The book was mine, but the story, now it was theirs. Unless I did something. Unless I took back the mic. Margaret came by later that day. She handed me a flash drive. What's this? She shrugged. A backup, all the early drafts, the metadata, dates, revisions, proof of authorship. I don't want to fight. Then prepare to be forgotten. Her words weren't cruel, they were clear, and she was right. I didn't want revenge, I didn't want headlines, but I wanted the truth. I started writing a new letter. This time, not to Marissa, to the readers, to the audience, to the ones who cared about what the story meant. It was a foreword. For a second edition, titled, The Letter She Never Read, and the Truth That Was Never Hers. I submitted it quietly, no drama, no threats, just words. The ones I'd been too tired to write the first time. I included everything, not gossip, not insults, just the truth, the timeline, the silence, the decision to share without permission, the consequences. I publish it as a postscript, unedited, unfiltered, and let it speak. Within hours, people were talking, not trending, not exploding, just reflecting. Some defended her, some didn't, most just said they finally understood. I didn't check the comments after that. I went for a walk instead. The wind was sharp, the sky is gray, but for once, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like the author. I didn't plan to see her again. After the second edition dropped, I stopped checking anything, no metrics, no emails, no news alerts. I told Margaret and Harry I needed time, real time, offline time. I turned off notifications. I turned off the part of me that still braced for her name every time my phone buzzed. But life isn't interested in clean exits. One Sunday morning, I walked into the local bookstore, one I used to visit with Marissa when we still lived like we had a future. The air smelled like paper and rain. I wanted quiet. I wanted a distraction. I didn't expect a crowd. There was a table near the center, a stack of books, a poster, a woman in a crisp blouse standing beside it. Marissa, book signing, not mine, hers. The title stopped me cold. Letters We Live Through. I blinked. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but then I saw the cover, muted tones, a silhouette of a woman walking away, an envelope left behind on a bench. I stared like it might disappear if I didn't move. She hadn't seen me yet. She was talking to a reader, smiling, signing, listening like she cared. I recognized the expression. It wasn't fake, it was real, but it was also curated, practiced. Marissa always knew how to wear sincerity like a coat. I took a step closer, enough to hear what she was saying. No, I didn't write the original letter, she said. But the experience, that part was mine too. It was about both of us, two people grieving different things. The reader nodded with misty eyes. It helped me let go of someone too. Marissa smiled gently. That's what stories do. They free us, even if we didn't choose how they were written. I felt something in my chest fracture, not from hurt, but from the weight of what I still hadn't said. She turned, and our eyes locked. For a second, everything froze, not because of longing, but because recognition comes with consequences. Her expression flickered. She gave a polite smile, the kind you give to strangers you think you remember from somewhere. Then she excused herself from the table and walked toward me. John, she said softly. Marissa. Her voice was even, mine wasn't. I didn't expect you here. Neither did I. We stood in the aisle between self-help and memoir, two ghosts pretending not to shiver. She glanced at the book I was holding. Looking for something? Peace. She looked away. There was a beat of silence, thick with old bruises. You read it, I'm guessing, she said. Both versions. She flinched, but only slightly. I didn't steal anything. You didn't have to, I replied. You just stepped into a spotlight I never invited you into. I was part of the story too. You left the story. I came back. I laughed under my breath. Not to me. Her jaw tightened. So what? Because I didn't beg, I don't get to heal? It's not about healing. It's about honesty. She crossed her arms. You think I'm lying? I think you're rewriting. To who? To everyone. To yourself. Marissa's eyes flashed. You really believe I did all of this just for attention? No, I said. I believe you need to feel seen. And when the world finally looked your way, you didn't care what it cost. She looked wounded. Good. And then, I did read the letter. I blinked. What? The original. The one you left. I stepped back. That's not possible. It was on the desk. I went back. When? 2 weeks after I left. I still had the spare key. Why didn't you say anything? Because by the time I read it, I knew I didn't deserve a reply. I stared at her. No, you don't get to say that now, after everything. I know. She stepped closer. But I need you to know, I didn't post it for attention. I posted it because it killed me that I never answered you, that the only real thing we had left was something I left behind. Then why didn't you just call me? Because I didn't want to be told I was too late. You were. Her eyes glistened. I'm still sorry. I didn't want to believe her. I wanted to stay cold, to keep the armor I'd built after months of watching her turn my grief into captions. But I could see it now, in her eyes, in her voice. She didn't come to this bookstore expecting me. She didn't rehearse this. I know I don't have the right, she whispered, but I miss you anyway. I swallowed. Why now? Because your second letter broke me more than the first, because you stopped writing to me and started writing to the world, and I realized, I wasn't in your heart anymore, I was just in your history. I didn't respond. She looked down. I thought I was okay, that being understood by strangers was enough, but it's not, it never was. A pause. Then, do you want the truth, John? I nodded. I kept your letter, the real one, the paper. I read it every week. I cried over it more than I cried the night I left. I built a new life on top of a house that still had your foundation underneath it. She was trembling now. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. But belief doesn't undo time. I glanced at her table. Her name is printed in bold. At the readers flipping through pages that never came from her hands. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. But I'm not yours anymore either. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded. I figured. A beat. I wish I'd fought harder too, she said. But you wrote the ending first, and I didn't want to rewrite it alone. I didn't know if that was supposed to be closure. But it felt like one. I turned to go. Then stopped. I wrote one more letter, I said. She looked up, hopeful. It wasn't for you, it was to me. What did it say? I smiled faintly. You survived. And then I walked out of the bookstore, past the table, past the shelves, past the ghosts. And for the first time since she left, I didn't look back. It's been 1 year since the letter went public. 9 months since the second edition made everything clear. 6 months since I walked out of that bookstore with Marissa standing in the aisle behind me, looking like someone who had just watched their past walk away in real time. And 3 weeks since my name was called, on stage, in front of a crowd, at an award ceremony I hadn't even planned to attend. I didn't go for the glory. I went because Margaret insisted. She said closure sometimes dresses like opportunity. When they handed me the award for Best Memoir of the Year, I didn't thank anyone in a suit. I didn't mention pain. I didn't mention Marissa. I just said, some stories aren't written for applause, they're written so you can breathe again. The crowd stood. Not because I cried, because I didn't. I left the event early. Harry waited outside, leaning against the hood of his car like he was still 25 and invincible. You didn't even mention her, he said. Why would I? Because she's still telling people you healed her. I chuckled. Let her. Harry raised an eyebrow. You're really okay with that? No, but I don't need to correct her anymore. Everyone who matters already knows. He nodded slowly. And then added, you got another letter. I froze. He handed me a sleek envelope. No return address. Inside was a card. Heavyweight paper. The same handwriting I knew better than my own. It read, I turned down the adaptation. It wasn't mine to tell. You were right. M. No apology. No signature. Just surrender. I let the card fall back into the envelope and tossed it into the glove box. Margaret called that night. They want to reprint the book again, anniversary edition. With what? A new chapter, about what came after. I was quiet for a moment, then said, tell them I'll write it, but it won't be about her. She didn't ask questions, she never did. I wrote the new chapter the next morning. It wasn't bitter, it wasn't even emotional, it was tactical. I titled it, Copyrighted Ghosts, What Happens When Your Grief Gets Hijacked. I detailed everything, the original drafts, the metadata, the emails, the false statements, the silent approvals, the fake collaborations she claimed, the brand deals that used my words without license. I attached screenshots, legal timestamps, professional witness testimony from Margaret, dated and verified. It wasn't spite, it was documentation. I submitted it with a disclaimer, this isn't revenge, this is record keeping. The chapter went viral within days, and this time, nobody clapped for her. They unfollowed, they unsubscribed, they asked why she lied, why did she stay silent, why did she never give the writer his name back when he lost everything else. Marissa posted a story once, plain black screen, white text. I never wanted this to be a fight. But she never denied it either. The comments were turned off within an hour. 2 days later, the adaptation deal was reassigned, a new writer, a new direction, a new contract, with me listed as executive producer and sole creator. It wasn't justice, it was just balance. Harry called it revenge. I called it repair. Because when someone burns your name to warm their hands, the only way to take it back is to light something brighter. I went back to work, not because I needed the money, but because I missed the silence. I still edited interviews, still cut out awkward breaths, still watched timelines tick like heart monitors. But this time, I wasn't running from grief. I was building something out of it. One day, I got a call from a non-profit literary foundation. They wanted to use my book in a course about narrative ethics and emotional exploitation. I said yes. They asked me to come speak. I said no. I didn't need to be on a stage anymore. I'd already said everything worth saying. But I did send them a quote for the final slide. Your voice is not an accessory for someone else's redemption arc. They printed it on a poster, framed it in their lobby. Margaret sent me a photo. Harry sent a gif of someone slow clapping. I laughed harder than I had in months. And just when I thought it was over, when the dust had settled, the headlines had faded, the followers had moved on, I got one final message, a letter, physical, typed. It came from a law firm. Inside was a check, $47,000, a residual royalty sum, transferred voluntarily. Memo line, reallocation from misattributed funds. No signature, but I didn't need one. She gave it back. Not because she wanted to, because she finally had no choice. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the memo. It was her final sentence, without words, without denial, without spin. She returned what never belonged to her. And I didn't spend it. I donated it to a writer's trust that protects intellectual property for indie authors. They added a section in my name. The letter grant, awarded to authors whose stories were stolen, silenced, or sold without consent. That was the final chapter. That was the ending I never thought I'd get. Not applause, not closure, just restoration and freedom. Marissa faded out after that. She stopped posting, stopped branding, stopped selling tote bags with my words on them. I think she finally understood what it meant to lose someone twice. The first time, to distance, the second, to the truth. And me. I wake up earlier now, I walk more, I drink my coffee black, and I write letters, not to her, to strangers who send me emails saying my story helped them fight back, to kids who said they never thought their silence mattered until someone made it loud, to women who cried over pages their partners never read, to men who never admitted their grief because it didn't look poetic enough to post. I write because I can, because I got my name back, because I survived, and because sometimes the best revenge is not becoming what broke you.